Hello and welcome to the Little Gardens text class. It is meant for you if you'd like to study A Course in Miracles in a home-style group. You'll find that close reading brings rich rewards, so grab your book and read along with us. While you're getting settled in your comfy chair with your book, I'd like to invite you to our newest program, A Course in Miracles Potpourri. It's a live class with chat. You can email me for the passcodes, or you could see it on YouTube. Also, please go to our website, thelittlegarden.org, for so much more, including 30-day retreats here in Sedona and lots of interesting stuff. Let's get going with today's text class.
So Timothy, what are we doing today?
Well, my dear, we are swimming in the delights of Christmas and
Okay.
doing section 5 of chapter 9, the Unhealed Healer.
All right. Okay.
So notice in the section before that it said the ego's plan is to make the error real and then overlook it.
Yeah,
That was the ego's plan of forgiveness.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is the core
Yeah.
of this section.
All right.
And you could call it healing instead of forgiveness. Make the problem real and then overlook it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with Connie.
The unhealed healer. The ego's plan for forgiveness is far more widely used than God's. This is because it is undertaken by unhealed healers and is therefore of the ego. Let us consider the unhealed healer more carefully now. By definition, he is trying to give what he has not received. If an unhealed healer is a theologian, for example, he may begin with the premise, I am a miserable sinner, and so are you. If he is a psychotherapist, he is more likely to start with the equally incredible is real for both himself and the patient, but that it does not matter for either of them. This whole paragraph is totally different than,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like the tone is different. The voice is different.
Mm-hmm. It seems very, to me, it seems very practical for Helen and Bill because they were psychotherapists.
Right.
And yeah, we'll get something out of it, but I think he's just really giving them a heads up. If they're healing, if they're trying to offer healing from the ego, it's coming from a place that there is no healing. I just want to say that the internet kind of did that at a place where you were reading sentence 6. Could you read 6 again, please, Connie?
If he is a psychotherapist, he is more likely to start with the equally incredible belief that attack is real for both himself and the patient, but that it does not matter for either of them.
Anyone else have a comment on this paragraph?
Well, there's also the thing that you can't, I mean, if you're not healed, what am I trying to say? You can't take anyone any farther than you are yourself, you know, so that if you're not healed,
Right.
how can you heal anyone else?
That's a good observation.
I'm intrigued by that last part, actually, that attack is real for both himself and the patient, but it doesn't matter for either of them. Why would it not matter?
Well, that was the whole point. Like you said, if you make attack real, then how are you going to overlook it?
Yeah.
And that's the problem that they have, is they say, yeah, you really were messed up by that, but it doesn't really matter.
It's the same as the the talk about forgiveness. You know, let's look and make sure that we got it nailed down, how sinful that situation was, and then we're going to overlook it.
Yeah, you were really hurt by your parents, but that doesn't really matter.
We're going to overlook it.
Yeah, we're going to try and overlook it.
Mhm.
It's kind of confusing.
Well, that's what it says. It's confusing. It's a contradiction in terms, which even the ego notes. We'll get to that. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting too that, I mean, it's come up before, but this was in 1970.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't even know that what is said here about the psychotherapist is definitely true today. You know what I mean? It's
Yes,
like,
I think so too. I think
oh,
this is talking about what psychotherapy was in their day.
right.
There's been a lot of spirituality that's come into psychotherapy since then. But let's just read it and see what we can get out of it and see if we can apply it to ourselves. Because the psychotherapy pamphlet says we're doing psychotherapy all the time. We're either doing it effectively or not. So it's talking about us too. We're all therapists.
Well, yeah, because he's saying the teacher and the student is the same thing as the healer and the patient.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole, all those dynamics of what happens.
It
But
applies to all of us.
Eric, what was your comment about that? It does not matter for either of them.
I guess I didn't really understand it, because I would have thought that it did matter, and you should try and resolve it somehow. If it's, you know, if there's an attack in your past that you believe in, then you should somehow try and understand it and make sense of it, and then dispel it somehow. You know, I thought that's what a psychotherapist would do.
Right. And that's why he's going to say in this section that that's why nothing ever happens in psychotherapy.
Yeah.
But he is referring, like the pamphlet for psychotherapy in the course is saying the real issue here going on is guilt.
Right.
And psychotherapy would talk about family systems and all kinds of other stuff going on without really nailing how definitive the guilt and shame is that we're operating from.
Yeah, so it's either the ego or the Holy Spirit. And we should mention, just for the sake of those who are doing this with YouTube, is that we're using the 3rd edition of A Course in Miracles from the Foundation for Inner Peace, which includes the supplements. And we're not going to get into it in this class, but those supplements in the back of this book, one of them is the psychotherapy pamphlet. So if you want to go there. Okay. Eric, would you read paragraph 2 for us, please?
Yeah. I have repeatedly said that beliefs of the ego cannot be shared, and this is why they are unreal. How then can uncovering them make them real? Every healer who searches fantasies for truth must be unhealed, because he does not know where to look for truth, and therefore does not have the answer to the problem of healing. Yeah, there's this, even amongst it seems amongst some people who are students of the course, there seems to be this belief that sharing your feelings, like, you know, expression sessions, I've heard it called, that is like a really valuable thing to do. But often it turns into just sharing what your feelings are and relate to your past and regurgitating your past story.
And having no healing come from it.
There's no healing in that, is there? It's just uncovering stuff from your past that isn't real.
Yeah.
So it's talking about fantasies, isn't it? Yeah.
So that's what he says in 16, that's false empathy, is to join them in their suffering. Right? So, so my question would be, in 2:3, every healer who searches fantasies for truth. Well, what is the fantasies that healer is searching for? What is the fantasy to that healer? And I think what it's saying is that attack is real.
Looking for who attacked whom.
Yeah.
Who's the enemy?
You're saying you were
Yeah.
damaged as a child, but you know,
Yeah. Or as an adult, you were abused or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That there's something real there that you believe in, and therefore it needs to be healed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like you say, the false empathy of thinking sharing, certain kinds of sharing is going to be therapeutic. Joining them in their suffering.
I
is
feel
gonna-
your pain.
Yeah.
I feel your pain,
Feel your
right?
pain.
Yeah. Well, gee, we try. We just needed the course to tell us how to do it. Well, the key to me here is that the healer who's searching fantasies, looking for truth, just doesn't know where to look.
Yeah.
And he's been telling us in 9:2, for example, it's about looking for the light in others,
Yeah.
not looking for the pain. Although we need to, that could be part of it if you're guided, but
Yeah.
that's not where you're going to find the healing, just by exposing the pain or
But
the
you're right.
catharsis of, screaming without doing something about what you see.
Yeah.
Say, oh, that came from ego, that can't be real.
Right.
Then it's just, we're looking in the wrong place.
Right. That's sort of like not recognizing when they're doing all that they're really calling for love.
Exactly.
Right.
That's-
Instead of articulating what they think is wrong, and then they're using magic or whatever, or false empathy. And
Mhm.
instead of looking at it and say, well, they're just calling for love.
Right.
They're not trying to, they're not really trying to deny love. They're trying to find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
In this situation where there's an unhealed healer and a patient who's got pain, they're both looking for healing.
Yeah.
They're both looking for love. They're looking for who they really are.
And true
They're just
understanding.
looking in the wrong direction.
Right. They're looking for true understanding.
Yeah.
Which is light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there something you wanted to say, Laura? I thought you were.
Well, not about that last thing. I guess I was just thinking about the value maybe in sharing private thoughts that could be debunked by mighty companions. Like, so is
Yeah.
there a value in being able to share something where you can say, we've all been there, but get over it. Like, start thinking with the Holy Spirit, you're going to the wrong teacher kind of thing. So I think, I get the point of, like, if it just becomes like we're all joining in the misery, it doesn't make sense. But if you can set someone straight, I think, right, there's value in that. And when you can identify, well, that's a private thought and not really the truth.
Yeah.
I think so there, I don't know, I guess I was just thinking about that, like, well, maybe there could be value and maybe you need a healed healer to do that for you. I don't know.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. So sharing them to make them real is the false empathy, but sharing them to show that they're not real.
Yeah. Yeah. To bring it up and look at it and say, oh, that's baloney. I believed in that because I believed something that wasn't true.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in 12-step programs where they, like, drunks can talk about, all the crazy things they did, and they're talking about it together, and then they're laughing about it because
Right.
they're recovered from it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever shared with anybody while they're doing the major data dump and you just don't say anything?
They're doing what? A data dump?
Data dump, when they're convention about,
Yeah.
and you don't say anything, you don't judge at all. And it's amazing sometimes how the conversation, they'll find their own way.
Yes.
Good
A
point.
lot. I think that's what they're talking about here, and hold forgiveness in the back of your mind when you're listening to that stuff, and
Yeah.
forgiving yourself for having the same ideas that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by being just a silent witness, they're able to hear themselves. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've all done that, I'm sure.
Everybody's done.
It's like when we learn to tune in, let's say I'm the person that's being spoken to and somebody's data dumping. I'm listening to their heart from the Holy Spirit to the Holy Spirit and keeping that alive. Then the light is shining on that stuff and they can see it's baloney. And I think that's what you're talking about.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
And I think we do that for one another a lot. It's a good thing. Yeah.
And I think there's also that recognition that that's just a call for love.
Mhm.
Right. So you can recognize that in a kind of positive way without buying into the story.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Laura, would you read 3, please?
Sure. There is an advantage to bringing nightmares into awareness, but only to teach that they are not real and that anything they contain is meaningless. That's what we we're just talking about. The unhealed healer cannot do this because he does not believe it. All unhealed healers follow the ego's plan for forgiveness in one form or another. If they are theologians, they are likely to condemn themselves, teach condemnation, and advocate a fearful solution. Projecting condemnation onto God, they make him appear retaliative and fear his retribution. What they have done is merely to identify with the ego, and by perceiving what it does, condemn themselves because of this confusion. It is understandable that there have been revolts against this concept, but to revolt against it is still to believe in it. Yeah, I think 7, that's really valuable. It's come up in other parts that we've read, but if we engage in it, we make it real.
Mhm.
So all the time that, I bemoan, oh, they did this to me, and oh, it was, like all this religious stuff, but I'm like still making it alive. I'm keeping it alive, I guess. Instead of now just like, I'm just going to forgive that and just go on to this kind of new understanding that I have. Because it talked particularly about religion. So that was the connection I made with, some of the fearful stuff that was instilled in me. And sometimes I could be like, well, they wounded me with that, and that's the story. I just need to, that's my call for love. And you just need to tell me to get over it.
Right.
and move on to, seeing this with Holy Spirit and that they were unhealed healers.
Right.
Move on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
They were doing the best they could, but they believe still that God makes rules and punishes infractions. And that's the story of God that's been carried through, even past the New Testament. The old thing got brought right straight through to today, where God is scary because he's got rules and you broke them, and therefore you're being punished with your nightmares either at night or in your life. Sickness, attack, poverty, whatever it is, you deserved it.
Right. So that's the historical sort of development of theology and all that. But he's really referring here to the ego, who really is trying to make attack real. Right.
Mhm.
But then it projects it onto God,
Right.
thinking God is going to be condemning when it's really the ego that is self-condemning. But he makes it about, there's this other forces or there's something else. It's God that's retaliative. So that's how the ego hides its plan of forgiveness that doesn't work, because it's really condemning you. It's saying, attack really is real.
And God's attacking you.
And you're going to be punished for your past and all that.
So
like I have to pay my debt.
Yep.
For the past. Like, how can I escape all those horrible things I did in that's the ego's secret game, but then it has this false forgiveness, but it doesn't matter. It's real, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. That was bad enough. We've all lived through that. Kathy, could you read 4, please?
Sure. Some newer forms of the ego's plans are as unhelpful as the older ones. Shouldn't that be all newer forms?
Probably.
Because form does not matter and content has not changed. So it's like, when you do that casserole spirituality, you just jump from one thing to the other. You know what I'm trying to say? It's just, you're kind of, a lot of times you can stay at this, you hear different things that, are insightful, but it's really, you're making the problem real that you're trying to address. Anyway. In one of the fewer forms, for example, a psychotherapist may interpret the ego's symptoms in a nightmare and then use them to prove that the nightmare is real. Having made it real, he then attempts to dispel its effect by deprecating the importance of the dreamer. This would be a healing approach if the dreamer was also identified as unreal. Yet if the dreamer is equated with the mind's corrective power through the Holy Spirit is denied. And this is a contradiction even in the ego's terms, and one that it usually notes even in its confusion. Okay, so they're saying that they're saying here that the dream, the nightmare is no good, but so is the person having the dream for having that dream kind of thing. I don't know.
Well, we talked about this, and it's confusing, but at the end it says, hey, it's confusing. So, but here's the best that I can do with it. And I just got it as you were speaking, as you were reading, is that this would be a healing approach if the dreamer, meaning the sleeping mind,
the ego mind,
right? Whether it's the dream of bodies or a dream at night, the dreaming ego mind is unreal.
Because it's a denial of our true power.
Yeah, because when you listen to regular people talking, and maybe some psychotherapists, I don't know, there seems to be a great confusion of what the mind is compared to what the Course is saying. The Course is saying, and you could go to the clarification of terms at the end of the teacher's manual. One of them is called Mind and Spirit. I think it's number 2. And it says, the mind seems to consist of 2 parts, the true self, the one mind we all share, and the ego. The ego is not real, but we're going to talk about it as if it is because you believe that it is. And when we look at the mind in that way, things get clarified. But it's saying that this unhealed healer doesn't understand that, thinks the brain is the mind and the body is real. And
right. So that last sentence is key, because what's really being presented here is a contradiction. So what is that contradiction? And it's basically like the ego's mind wants to say attack is real.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the ego mind wants to say. But then the way the ego's going to deal with that is say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. But that's denying the true mind.
And that's, yes. And it doesn't give you any power to listen to Holy Spirit.
Right. So that's the contradiction. Attack is real,
but it doesn't
matter.
Yeah.
That's the contradiction.
Okay, so let's get out of this craziness and see what might be better. We're kind of short on readers today. Tim, you want to read 5?
Sure. So he's going to address this idea of contradiction and the idea that what we're trying to build is strength of the mind, strength of the person. So if the way to contradict fear or counteract fear is to reduce the importance of the mind, how can this build ego strength? Such evident inconsistencies account for why no one has really explained what happens in psychotherapy. Nothing really does. Now, again, a lot has happened since the course came into the
Yeah,
world
that's
about
right.
psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So he's speaking from the standpoint long before the course was finished and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right? So nothing really does, nothing real has happened to the unhealed healer, and he must learn from his own teaching. His ego will always seek to get something from the situation. The unhealed healer, therefore, does not know how to give and consequently cannot share. He cannot correct because he's not working correctly. He believes that it's up to him to teach the patient what is real, although he does not know it himself.
And they're digging around in the darkness looking for what's real.
Right.
Yeah.
So like from the pamphlet of psychotherapy, what it's going to say is, when you say the attack is not real, what you also have to say is that ego image of yourself is not real.
Yeah.
And that's where the contradiction comes in. Because if you're making it real, you can't overlook it. And the only solution is change the image of how you see yourself.
Mm. Any other thoughts about that paragraph?
So it's not only the dream would be the what's manufactured. It's the manufacturer that's also unreal, right? I mean, it's like if you
Manufacturer, is
yeah.
that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
the manufacturing the dream is also unreal. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
The ego mind that believes in separation, attack, and all forms of lack. That
Yeah.
is unreal, is what it's saying. And and he's been saying that since the introduction to the course. Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. This is the learning that we have to go through in the course. It's like it's not obvious to us, is it?
No.
That our ego thinking is not real.
You know why this is hard to understand is because you really can't explain insanity.
Yeah, that's
There
right.
is
Yeah.
no reason for insanity. All you can do is point it out
Right.
and describe it, but it's not understandable what's going on here. You can't make attack real and then say, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have to change the concept of that person. If you're really gonna, because he's saying in that first sentence, you really do want, you want to build a strength of that person and the strength of the mind. That's what you really want to do, but you're doing it in this contradictory way, making the ego real.
Yeah. So that idea of building ego strength, that's an old psychotherapeutic concept.
Yeah.
It's not the course's concept. The course doesn't want to make the ego real, but building ego strength was a healing strategy in the old systems.
Yeah.
In 5, he's saying his ego will always seek to get something from the situation.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I'm a healer.
Yeah, that's it.
I've got some sort of pride because I can help someone, or it's something in it for me, basically, isn't there?
Yeah.
As a healer.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. He's trying to establish his value, but he can't do it because he doesn't really have value, because he's confused about mind and self.
He's confused about what he is and what the patient really is. Yeah, it seems like the whole thing rests on that sentence 8. He believes it is up to him to teach the patient what is real. And he doesn't know himself.
Instead of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That's what he was building on in the paragraph before.
Okay, I'll read 6. What then should happen? When God said, let there be light, there was light. Can you find light by analyzing darkness, as the psychotherapist does? Or like the theologian, by acknowledging darkness in yourself and looking for a distant light to remove it, while emphasizing the distance?
Like God is totally different than us.
And he's so far away.
Right. But the light does come from him. Right?
Yeah.
But he's so far away.
And of course he's very far away because of my guilt.
Yeah.
Healing is not mysterious. Oh, that's a good thing. Nothing will change unless it is understood, since light is understanding.
The Course has been consistent in using light as understanding or awareness of the truth. A miserable sinner cannot be healed without magic, nor can an unimportant mind esteem itself without magic. So I think he's just saying right there, both of these approaches that he's talked about, the theologic one and the psychotherapeutic from, it sounds to me like Freudian, but I'm not an expert, so I don't know. But both of these are just not going to work. They're not going to be true healing. I'd really like to invite you to look at that psychotherapy pamphlet. It's kind of, like you were saying, Connie, it has a different tone. It has a more professional tone, but it really does apply to everybody. And it's saying the only way you can heal is to find the Holy Spirit here and in there, in the patient and in yourself. That's it. In other words, love, connection, the one mind, that's where the healing is. All that other stuff, interesting, but not healing. Any other thoughts on paragraph 6? Well, then it would be Connie's turn again.
Can I just pause for a minute on that, on 6, a miserable sinner?
Yeah.
So in other words, what he's saying is, the psychotherapist from the standpoint of trying to build ego strength, what he's saying is, yeah, you did suffer from your from those behaviors and all the things that you did, and it did make you miserable, all those actions and things, but it's okay. A miserable but you can be healed even though the attack was real, something like that. Is that what he means by miserable sinner?
I think he's referring to the theologian's approach.
Yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Both forms of the ego's approach then must arrive at an impasse, the characteristic impossible situation to which the ego always leads. It may help someone to point out where he is heading, but the point is lost unless he is also helped to change his direction. The unhealed healer cannot do this for him, since he cannot do it for himself. The only meaningful contribution the healer can make is to present an example of one whose direction has been changed for him and who no longer believes in nightmares of any kind. The light in his mind will therefore answer the questioner, who must decide with God that there is light because he sees it. And by his acknowledgement, the healer knows it is there. That is how perception ultimately is translated into knowledge. The miracle worker begins by perceiving light and translates his perception into sureness by continually extending it and accepting its acknowledgement. Its effects assure him it is there. It's a complicated way to say that basically knowing what's true and real and extending it to my brother, that my brother then senses it, and it's kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but
he senses it and experiences healing.
right.
And then it goes back to the healer.
And we're all one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that sentence 4 is the key, because what he's been establishing is like in the workbook, words are important. Words can help teach, but it's really the demonstration that the therapist or the teacher of God has of this peace
Yeah,
that's unconditional.
right.
This peace has no conditions. So if the patient's attacking the therapist does not respond in kind, or if the student is attacking the teacher does not respond in kind, because it's standing on the light of understanding that this is a peace that has no conditions. It's unconditional peace.
Mhm.
And it's that demonstration that teaches others.
That's right.
I mean, you can see somebody, they may not be sophisticated, they may not, be any of those worldly values, but they have deep peace.
Yeah,
And you can see that in them.
you feel it, don't you?
You feel it.
Yeah.
So the demonstration is the key there.
Mm-hmm. So sentence 4 that you just referenced, do you want to read that?
The only meaningful contribution the healer can make is to present an example, a demonstration of one whose direction has been changed for him. For him, right. That's the grace, that's the gift.
Yeah.
My direction has been changed, and who no longer believes in nightmares of any kind. So remember at the beginning of 8, he said, we need a change in the direction of the curriculum, but we also need a change in its content. Right? But that's where the grace comes in from the Holy Spirit. That's where the idea of acceptance becomes so important, because I just realized it's all messed up. I'm all confused, and I just need to accept that gift.
Right, help from outside
of light.
Yeah, the last section we read was about how we need a guide. If we think we don't need a guide, we are ipso facto listening to the ego, right?
Or using it as a guide.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Eric, could you read 8, please?
Yeah, I was just going to say something about sentence 8.
Sure.
He's talking about translating his perception into sureness by continually extending it and accepting its acknowledgement. I like that word sureness because, well, speaking for myself, I'm never that sure really. But by applying the stuff that we read in this book and letting it sort of have an effect on us, and then seeing the response of other people to that somehow, that's still a bit of a mystery to me. It sort of increases your sureness. It makes you think, well, they're seeing something that I don't really see myself, but there's, they're seeing it, so it must be there in some way.
Right.
And then it builds up your confidence, doesn't it, in what you actually do believe in, but there's more belief to be got at. If that makes sense. Yeah,
it's like a cycle.
We
receive it from the Holy Spirit, we give it, we see it in the Holy Spirit in them. That shows us, oh, I was listening, I was extending. Let me do some more of that.
It is working somehow. I don't know how, but
right.
But that's where the Holy Spirit comes in, because remember we were reading in Does Jesus Play a Special Place in Healing? He was saying all of the teachers of God are going to experience temptation to believe in the ego, but why should their students be limited by that? They shouldn't be limited by your limitations, because you recognize it really is the Holy Spirit who's giving and receiving to the Holy Spirit in the other person. That's why you build confidence and sureness and certainty
in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, because regardless of my inability to really understand it, I'm trying to offer healing, I'm trying to offer forgiveness. I see myself as conflicted in that, but I can stand in the fact that just that I've opened up to that idea and asked the Holy Spirit to come in, the Holy Spirit did work. And that's where the certainty comes in. That's how I'm understanding that. That we can count on the fact that it really is the grace of God, the grace of love that's working, and that doesn't have exceptions.
Right.
Even though we may seem to have them.
Right.
So, paragraph 8. A therapist does not heal, he lets healing be. That's the crux of it all, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Acknowledging that you can't do anything. All you can do is let things happen through you.
Right.
He can point to darkness, but he cannot bring light of himself, for light is not of him. Yet being for him, it must also be for his patients. He never healed alone.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit is the only therapist. He makes healing clearer in any situation in which he is the guide. You can only let him fulfill his function. He needs no help for this. He will tell you exactly what to do to help anyone he sends to you for help, and will speak to him through you if you do not interfere. Yeah, that's the do not interfere bit, isn't it? Stand back and let him lead the way.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, well, I can do this, I can help this person, when we really have not got any clue how to help them.
Yeah.
Remember that you choose the guide for helping, and the wrong choice will not help. But remember also that the right one will. Trust him, for help is his function, and he is of God. As you waken other minds to the Holy Spirit through him, and not yourself, you will understand that you are not obeying the laws of this world, but the laws you are obeying work. The good is what works is a sound though insufficient statement. Only the good can work. Nothing else works at all. The good is what works. I've never read that statement anywhere else, really.
You know what I think it might refer to is the potpourri of psychotherapeutic techniques that don't seem to hang together at all, but you know, you pull one out here and it works. Oh, you
So
say,
you use affirmations and things like that to make yourself feel better, and they do work to some extent, don't they? That sort of thing.
Yeah. You know, well, I'd like to read something from the manual, because I think that it really relates to this situation about continuing concern for the person you're helping.
Okay.
So there's a section in the manual that says, should healing be repeated? And I'd like to read that. So it's saying this question really answers itself. Healing cannot be repeated. If the patient is healed, what remains to heal him from? And if the healing is certain, we have already said it is, what is there to repeat? For a teacher of God to remain concerned about the results of healing is to limit the healing, right? So that's having the faith in the Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit, not in yourself.
Right, is that I've asked the Holy Spirit to help me. He said the Holy Spirit will help you in any way, will give you words, but trust that the Holy Spirit's work is done.
Right.
Even if the symptoms seem to continue in you or the patient, just trust that it's been done.
You know, what's interesting too is that the healing that's offered through the Holy Spirit heals the therapist as well as the patient.
And therefore he's a demonstration.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. In other words, the therapist just brings the Holy Spirit into the situation,
right,
and lets the Holy Spirit speak through him, because the whole sentence 4, the Holy Spirit is the only therapist.
Right. And remember also too, if you read the supplements that come after the psychotherapy thing, but it's also true in psychotherapy, the whole issue is the equality between the healer and the patient, the whole equality between the teacher and the student.
Because it's only the Holy Spirit in both. Yeah.
Right. So if we think we're giving something to somebody that they don't have, that's what sets up the egoic sense of self. Like I have the answer, I'm giving it to them, they don't have it.
Yeah.
Well, they do have it because they have the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? We didn't really dig into paragraph 8 very much. Did we see enough? Anybody got any thoughts they want to share?
Again, for me, this is why the word acceptance is so important. Like, just let it in. Like he said at the beginning, he's not healing, he's just letting healing in.
Right. And then sentence 9, remember that you choose the guide for helping, and the wrong choice, ego, will not help. But the right one will.
Yeah. And then he goes into trust, which is the foundation of the teacher of God. And everything else comes from trust.
Right.
That all changes are only for good.
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
Yeah. Well, let's wind this up then with Laura.
This course offers a very direct and very simple learning situation and provides the guide who tells you what to do. If you do it, you will see that it works. Its results are more convincing than its words. They will convince you that the words are true. By following the right guide, you will learn the simplest of all lessons. By their fruits ye shall know them, and they should know themselves. Well, I think that number 6 is what you were just talking about, that we're not really, in the position of being a teacher, we're not really bestowing anything to the student that they don't have.
Right.
It's offering the way for them to experience it for themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
By experiencing it for ourselves first.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You know, what I think is interesting too about paragraph 9 is it's very much like that lesson that says this course is not asking you to take this on an unsupported faith. Try it. You know, this paragraph is saying just try it, and you'll see that it works. It has effects in the world.
A demonstration, but you have to begin with faith.
Yeah.
Because you're confused.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on. So you have to have faith in the miracle, but then the miracle brings the witnesses.
Faith,
true.
Faith enough to say, hey, I'm going to listen to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Not the ego, or not by myself alone.
Yeah.
That's what the ego is. It's the illusion that I am by myself alone.
Yeah.
Well, that was a quick one and a little mysterious. Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share about this?
You can't understand insanity.
That's right.
You can just want it to be gone.
Well, you know, the whole thing, what he's saying here is there's situations, there's methodologies that don't work, and there's a methodology that does work.
Yeah.
Put aside these other ones and just listen to the Holy Spirit. When someone is in front of you who's calling for help, calling for love, acting out, being monstrous or just cranky, whatever, go to the Holy Spirit and ask Holy Spirit to show you the Holy Spirit in them. That has been, a theme in this whole chapter.
Yeah.
So I guess this is just a special case of it, the therapy deal.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to share about this or anything else we've done today? Well then, I guess we'll wrap it up easy. Would you like to see a regional center in Sedona, Arizona, where course students can come together to learn, to share, and to grow, to expand in awareness of the love that's all around us? If you would, go to YouTube, ACIM Garden. That's our YouTube channel, ACIM Garden. And the playlist is called ACIM Regional Center. You could also email me, jan@thelittlegarden.org. Thank you.